Hello everyone, good day to all of you, and hope you're all doing well. I wanted to do a bit of a different video today talking about Blue Kamysh, or commonly referred to in English as blue tiger stripe camouflage. It's what this jacket you can see that I'm wearing, that is the camouflage, and it's a pretty interesting camouflage. It was developed back in the early-ish 90s for the Russian MVD, mostly intended as a federal or security type of camouflage. Interestingly, you do see pretty much identical version of this also used back in the day about a decade ago, for example, in Ukraine. So did see some use outside of Russia as well. And interestingly, although this is a more so security type of pattern, police type of pattern, it actually did see quite a bit of use in the Second Chechen War, which will be most of what the footage I'll be putting up here in the video. That's what most of that is from. So, like I said, this is going to be a bit of a different video. I have occasionally done camouflage videos in the past, never too frequently, but this one in particular is going to be pretty different, right? Because I keep kind of discussing camouflage and patterns and all that. This is objectively not a very good camouflage, but to go into that a bit more, of course, camouflages have two jobs, the most obvious being that it should conceal the wearer, which obviously you can see this does not. Now, saying that, you might think that this either does pretty well in snow. I've tested this in a lot of different snowy environments, and you can see it is snowing right now. This is way too much of a dark blue compared to snow. Even when it's more so in the evening, this always stands out, right? When it gets darker, this just shows up as a almost black blob, whereas the snow still looks pretty white, of course. And similarly, as far as an urban pattern, it's usually pretty hard to make an effective urban camouflage pattern, and this doesn't really do that well in that regard either. And really, the only good urban camouflage pattern I have ever personally found is the phantom leaf. I forget the exact wasp variant because they all have a pretty similar naming convention, but I'll put it up on the screen. That's the only one I've found that generally does pretty well. A lot of the other urban patterns tend to fail. The second job, however, of a camouflage pattern is, of course, to identify the wearer. And that's where this does really well, maybe too well, because it's blatantly obvious that you're wearing this pattern no matter how far away you are. So this is something you see a lot, especially if you look at pretty much any modern conflict, in particular, for example, the current war in Ukraine. Both sides are wearing very, very similar clothes. Both sides are wearing multicam. And even outside of the war in Ukraine, if you look at the types of camouflage patterns that countries now are adopting, they're either multicam or look very, very similar to it. For example, Scorpion, OCP here in the US, Multitarn for Germany. It looks slightly different, but again, very similar color palette. MTP in Britain. There's a lot more. I'm not going to bore you with listing every single one, but point is, they're all kind of adopting that color and that similar sort of pattern generally. This, on the other hand, yeah, it's very, very obvious. Now, one other thing interesting, though, kind of semi-related, is this camo pattern also bears a lot of similarity to the blue reed. I'm not super good at Russian, so if you look at the actual Russian names, they both are pretty similar, but there's a so-called green reed and a blue reed pattern that from a distance can look kind of similar to this blue tiger stripe. They were actually both developed around the same time and used similarly in the Second Chechen War. The difference with that reed camo is the pattern itself, of course, if you look at that. But second, the actual color palettes. So if you look at this pattern itself, you'll notice that primarily there's a bunch of large stripes of light blue broken up by pretty much, if you want to call it like a medium type of blue, just again, tiger stripes going in a horizontal pattern. And then you can see there's smaller dark blue stripes and then very, very little, usually kind of interspersed with the aforementioned dark blue stripes are some really, really close to near black, but still pretty much like a navy blue. What I've noticed is if you look at this camouflage pattern compared to that blue reed pattern, generally from a distance it seems like the reed tends to become more of a blob, whereas with this it still retains a lot of its pattern since it is so different in contrast from the dark blues versus the lighter blues, which does help somewhat to break up the outline, kind of, though like I said, you still end up looking pretty blue compared to everything that's around, so it's not like it's going to conceal you very well either way. Now, one point that's interesting to note, as I mentioned with that reed pattern, they did make that in a green and blue variant. Similarly, this was actually also made in a green pattern as well as the blue here. If you're interested in the green, I don't have it, but Brent0331, he did a very good camouflage test on that one. And overall, it does seem to actually work a little bit better as far as concealment, though maybe a little bit too light. And actually, the direction that the stripes go, the tiger stripe pattern, it seems like it can make it stand out a little more than other green woodland types of camo patterns. So if you want this pattern for any sort of practical purpose to actually camouflage you, obviously would not really recommend it. It doesn't really blend in at all. But if you are interested in acquiring the camo just because you think it's cool or for whatever other purpose, easiest way I have found currently is to just go on eBay. There is still a decent amount floating around because this is a bit of an older pattern. Like I said, kind of originated in the 90s. So even with the current embargoes on Russia for pretty much the rest of the world, it's still fairly attainable. It has gone up in price, certainly. For instance, I got this one quite a while ago, I think 5 or 6 years ago from Gray Shop back in the day. This is their ANA. I'll put up the exact model number. Decent jacket, does have its shortcomings for sure. But back then I think it was going for $30-ish less than it is going for currently. So it hasn't gone up too bad in price, at least as of now, but yeah, do expect to pay a little bit more than you would for a comparable just surplus item from here in the US or Europe. Overall, it's a cool looking pattern. It is actually one of my favorite looking patterns. It's objectively one of the least effective for sure, but I grew up playing a lot of Stalker and Metro, so that's why I wanted to get this several years ago. Interestingly, this pattern was not actually used, to my knowledge, at all in Stalker. I think I bought this jacket kind of misremembering the actual camo patterns that show up. For example, you might think this looks fairly similar to the camo in Clear Sky, Stalker Clear Sky, but that faction in Stalker actually wears a different camo pattern, which I believe is supposed to be based on a Ukrainian police camouflage, but somewhat older game, so the textures aren't of the best quality. Similarly, I don't even think this showed up in Metro, so maybe it did in one of the trailers. I'm not going to really go back and check. I don't care that much, but it's interesting to note this hasn't seen the most usage in media, but yeah, cool pattern. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you found this just enjoyable, just an overview of the camo pattern. Like I said, not really a practical one by any means, but just kind of fun to look at. So thank you all for watching this bit of out of the ordinary video for me. If you have any other questions on this or want to add anything else about this pattern or any other camo stuff in general, by all means, leave those in the comments below. And any actual questions, I will do my best to get back to you and answer those. Other than that, take care, and I hope to see you all in the next one. See you then.